Exposing the unforgivable truth of how my partner left me to die, here's what happened to me later. I will never forget the terrible hurt that last together with darkness I felt when I was surrounded by concrete blocks. Memories were splattered like flakes from a body I was drowning in. And taking a deep breath every moment felt like ill-fought. My closest friend and business associate Jake was above me pointing a gun. "There is only room for one of us," he coldly muttered while staring at me without a shred of emotion. From the start, I knew he was ambitious. However, I never thought he would do something as atrocious as this. "There is only one place for my vision." You would never imagine how disheartening it sounds and feels. He had placed and set up a meeting which turned out with me being shot and left for dead by him. Everything I had and had worked towards vanished with him. I wanted to be able to say that we persevered, but I know 100% that until I have Jake, I cannot put anything together. Somehow, I survived and was found by a passerby who helped me and got me to the hospital. I spent weeks in recovery, supposedly dead. Even in my weakest moments, I had the persistence to think that I needed to expose what Jake did to me. He thought he had buried me, but now I was ready to take back what was mine. It feels like I hardly rested and was constantly teetering death, but I had another reason to fight. During my recovery, I chose to stay dead. I knew Jake had plans for the business, and I wanted him to let his guard down before coming back and taking what was mine. It was definitely a gamble, but I had learned a lot about Jake over the time I spent dead, and he was not the person I dealt with earlier. If he discovered I was alive, I knew it would be extremely dangerous for me. After I got discharged from the hospital, my normal life was never the same. And the truth is, I didn't want to go back to it. I needed to disappear. Using the resources of a select few trustworthy friends, I managed to erase myself from the public eye. The world assumed that Sam Mitchell had died under tragic circumstances, which conveniently allowed Jake to exploit the situation easily. I had my first glimpse of Jake after he started dominating the business as a so-called grieving partner. Very cunningly, he blended in and started consolidating power for himself. There was growth in our business under Jake's leadership, but I was aware of the sinister truth. From the shadows, I could see he was partaking in trunk loads of illegal activities. Money laundering was the least of his worries, putting the company on a front to deal with things that make professionally trained criminals tremble. I spent months gathering information. In the dead of the night, I would nocturnally hack into my company's server. I managed to gain access to the files Jake thought were unknowable. He had his bases covered. With layers of encryption and offshore accounts, he was careful in his tracking, unloading his secrets under minimal support. But he greatly miscalculated. I was the one who built the security systems he is currently using for shielding his information. Bit by bit, I gathered evidence such as emails, financial records, and recordings of his dealings with dubious people. Jake seemed to have used our company as a way to strike deals with some nasty people while enriching himself and putting others in danger. The evidence alone would seal the case, but it was not enough. I needed something more detailed, something that would publicly prove that he was in fact guilty beyond any doubt. In case you have yet to follow our channel, chances are you may not see this video ever again. So you subscribe now, because you will surely have access to some of the best content ranging from stories, videos, and many more. Then I came across something that was chilling. Jake apparently had just opened a couple offshore accounts connected with some smaller bank in Hawaii. He was funneling large sums of money into these accounts since the transactions were far too large and too regular to be legal. It looked like he was getting ready to make a pretty big move for which he could stash his illegal funds as well as the bank account itself high up where no one could reach it if things became too problematic. Hawaii became my next destination. Jake assumed that he would be able to work undercover in Hawaii, and so I chose to follow him. If I could figure out what he was trying to do, then maybe that could be the last evidence needed to finally bring him down. I traveled to Hawaii with a false identity as John Evans. As soon as I stepped off the plane and onto the sun-drenched islands, I knew that this paradise was the reason for Jake's undoing. I didn't want to be seen, so I stayed in one of the more remote areas of the island where I could mingle with tourists and natives rather easily. Hawaii was gorgeous, and it was the opposite of the dark mess that was brewing in my life. Even if the island was breathtaking with all of the palm trees, waves crashing against the shore, my life was troubling. Remember, I wasn't here to view the sights. Each day was another challenge, and deeper into the shadows that Jake had created. The bank Jake frequented was in Honolulu, a sight to behold, although it was a small, discreet building located in a less busy part of town. With the assistance of Mike, I had procured documents and fabricated identification that enabled me to access the records of the bank. It was challenging since the bank's privacy and security was top-notch. But once I got in, I retrieved everything I needed. Jake had been funneling money into numerous shell companies, all registered under different names. Individual bank accounts linked to those companies were starving in investments, properties all over the world, stocks of multiple corporations, and even exquisite rare pieces of art. Within a truly shocking amount of time, He was crafting a fence of finances that made him impossible to catch. But there's more. One of the documents I came across was the blueprint of an entirely new scheme, planning to use the company's resources to perform astonishing levels of market manipulation. I strategically stored evidence in hopes that one day I could reveal what had happened to the world and that I could bring him down. In doing so, Jake would have not only lost his career, but would have gone to jail for a long period of time. When I was gathering the documents, I decided to take a photograph of them instead. This way he would not have learned of anything. It was clear to me that photo documentation was insufficient. Therefore, I did everything required so that he no longer had a chance of waking up to a new life. The man I was about to frame would do anything to protect himself. Crime is grave in nature. Finding out that I was the one who orchestrated all this would have made him come for me, which at this point is the last thing I want. Sending me the evidence was very dangerous since I already did a lot of suspicious activity. Still, randomly wandering an island, especially to the quieter spawn, was a definite giveaway of suspicion as well. Hawaii is one of the most beautiful places, so it was easy to lose sight of my mission. Even when it was time to leave, I needed to confront everyone who was involved with Jake, including the bank workers who had helped him deceive so many. I knew that what I was doing was very risky, but I had an aim, and my aim was to reveal the people acting behind closed doors. The next day, I scheduled a meeting with the bank manager, Mr. Tanaka, posing as an interested investor. Despite his age, he was a professional, having had a reputation of keeping things under wraps. I placed some pieces of evidence on the table, and the look on his face made it seemingly clear that he knew how severe the situation was. "You have been protecting a felon," I said in a neutral voice, observing him. "This is sufficient enough to instate federal charges alongside you and your bank." Mr. Tanaka showed signs of shock. "Who are you?" he said, rhythming. "That does not matter to me," was my response. "I need your cooperation. That is what matters. You will be contacted by the authorities shortly. You are advised to prepare your statement and ensure that it has everything that you know about Jake Collins. If you try to shield him, you will go down with him." His eyes showcased fear, but he nodded slowly. "I understand." Now that I was sure I had frightened him enough, I left the bank and went directly to the airport. It was time for me to go back to the mainland. Hawaii gave me everything that I needed in order to take Jake down. Sitting in my seat on the plane, I felt the determination settle in. This was the beginning of the end for Jake. As soon as I arrived home, my first move was to meet up with Mike. We prepared relentlessly for the last battle during the next few days. The evidence that I collected in Hawaii was going to be the piece of the puzzle that brought Jake's entire operation together. We bound everything together in a dossier that with one single glance revealed everything about the empire Jake built from his crimes. Jake was about to organize a gala, a great occasion to unveil a new project for the company. This was a remarkable scenario for his exposure. The event would have investors, the press, and powerful people in attendance. This seemed like the perfect opportunity for me to set the record straight. The much-awaited night of the gala had come. I was positioned outside the Great Hall, feeling my heartbeat rise. It was my first public sighting ever since I supposedly died. I had gone through steps to conceal my look just enough so that I would not be identified before the right moment. Upon stepping into the hall, the lavishness of the event overwhelmed me. Jake has spent too much money on this. What a glee it was to revel in the outcome of his corruption. Jake was at the core of things, speaking flawlessly and looking graceful, every single description of a businessman in a Gordon Gekko suit. I kept an eye on him from the shadows, feeling a burning rage. Everything was taken away from me, but tonight I will take it all back. I postponed my plans until the speeches started. Jake was walking onto the stage, thanking everyone for their efforts while describing the company's and his own future. A bright, shimmering future. The way he spoke was nothing more than a recited speech. He was so confident when giving it. But he is in for a big surprise. While he was talking, I walked to the front of the room. They did not seem to notice me until I came on stage. A silence settled over the audience, and Jake lost his train of thought upon seeing me. He looked sick, and for a moment, he looked as though he had seen a ghost. "Good evening to all of you," I said while my voice rang through the hall. "My name is Sam Mitchell, and contrary to what some of you are made to believe, I am very much alive and well." Gasps and whispers ensued in the room. Jake stood there with his eyes wide in shock. "This man," I said, pointing my finger at Jake, "is not the man you think he is. He is a liar and a thief and also an attempted murderer." I gestured towards the screen behind us. Mike, who was in the AV booth, was ready with the presentation. The lights came on the screen and showed a number of documents, emails, and recordings that depicted the extent of Jake's criminal activities. The evidence from Hawaii was crucial in demonstrating the manner in which he used offshore accounts and shell companies to launder money and manipulate markets. "You thought you could escape without consequences, didn't you, Jake?" I said while facing towards him. "However, you dramatically miscalculated something. You left the task unfinished." Jake stumbled backward, revealing a mix of anger and panic. "This is a trap. He screamed. He's fibbing. Is she 9318? No, Jake, I answered with some regard. The proof is more than clear. You attempted to murder me to conceal your felonies, but the truth is now known to everyone. As security officials approached Jake, he made a futile attempt at running away. However, the law enforcement personnel who received the briefing were already present. They had removed him from the location within seconds, pushing him to the floor and restraining him with handcuffs behind his back. The ensuing havoc was unlike anything I had seen. The coverage of my escape and the betrayal by Jake was not only featured on the news, but was also the talk of tabloids. His entire empire collapsed in a span of days as all the investors pulled out and the cops started to confiscate properties. The proof was all there. As a result, Jake was charged with several crimes that would guarantee his imprisonment for years. After all that happened, I had to put the pieces together and start over. The world learned the harsh truth about Jake Collins, but it had also learned who I was. I was not the man left to die. I had come back to life to clear my name and expose the injustices I went through. While I did not enjoy the life I was being handed, I did feel content for at least having some semblance of my life back, unlike the man who took it from me. With the support of Mike and the other friends I had managed to make, I was able to start a new project. After what I went through, I surrounded myself with people who knew the meaning of integrity and did not use betrayal to succeed. Now, it was time to start the painful journey of healing, both mentally and physically. I just knew I had to do something with the wreck Jake left behind, and I was willing to do it. I went back to the warehouse where Jake had abandoned me, where I was meant to die. It was a shell of its former self, bare of any sign of the fight that transpired within its walls. I found myself reflecting on the events that lead to this moment as I took deep breaths of the brisk air. Goodbye, Jake. I softly spoke his name. Not to him, but the figure who cast a shadow over my existence. Still, I moved on, glad to be no longer looking at a part of my life I had long needed to escape. I had returned from my battle ready to face him, and in doing so, not only was I able to bring Jake to justice, but reclaim my story as well. He had tried to erase me, but, in the end, it was his name that was tainted. I remains here in this world. I, who battles for what is right, and comes out the other end victorious. I uncovered my wife's hidden criminal alter ego, and she has been living a double life. Lily and I, being university sweethearts, had what now seems like the perfect marriage. We could finish each other's sentences, support each other, and laugh at each other's inside jokes. We had wonderful connections which helped us build an unshakable bond of trust, or so I thought. Planning the wedding was always an exciting idea for both of us, and getting to do it was a true celebration of love. I was thrilled about everything until it came time to actually sign the marriage certificate. The day my family told me, I broke down sobbing. My life is forever ruined. At first glance, I thought I was just nervous, but now I know I was simply not ready. Lily works from home as a freelance graphic designer, and boy, was her schedule irregular. Sometimes she would take trips to meet clients, at times pulling all-nighters to get there. I never bothered question anything because I was under the impression that Lily was plenty passionate about her work. However, changes began to surface. At first, they were small enough for me to brush off as tiques. She had some phone calls in the middle of the night which would take place in another room. She spoke softly, but with urgency. There were constant out-of-town business trips that she was unable to explain in detail because of her client's confidentiality. Then, there was the peculiar assortment of electronics which were far too advanced, especially for a graphic designer, that were appearing in her home office. Still, I never proactive in looking into it, and I was concerned enough not to intrude too much. I had confidence she would let me know what was necessary when the time came. Unfortunately, over the months, signs were becoming too difficult to overlook. I recall one incident vividly. She went to shower, left her laptop on with the screen facing up. A message appeared on the screen, one that left a bone-chilling feeling that is still too hard to forget. It was a message from an unknown person. The chat box displayed, "The shipment is secured. Awaiting further instructions." I completely froze. Orders on designs were certainly not this serious. My heart started racing with every possibility I could think of. What shipment? What instructions? Who was the person Lily was talking to? Before I could scan my surroundings for clues, I abruptly heard the water stop running. Panic enveloped me and I shut the laptop way too fast as I rushed to the living room. I felt as if I suddenly did something without breaking eye contact with a mixture of mascara and a loaded gun. I had a pretty good idea where all of this was headed. With the edge of my bed underneath my palm, I tried to calm myself. Who was my wife? I felt betrayed. I kept twisting my head in different directions trying to settle my mind on one singular stance. There had to be a normal explanation behind this, right? In reality, this was far bigger than what I chose to believe. Something was undisputedly wrong. With this in mind, I started observing her movements more carefully. I saw how she often stole glances at her phone. It was impossible to see her face, as it was deeply concealed behind a mask. I saw how she would get lost in her office for hours on end, coming out only when she was certain that I was busy. It was like she was leading some parallel life right under my nose, and I had chosen not to notice it. A couple of days later, she informed me that she had to leave for another business trip. A new client in Chicago, she said as she turned her head away from me. I will be away for some days. I smiled and nodded instead. Of course, I said, forcing a smile thinking about how tired I was. I will always be here when you need me. As soon as she departed, the first thing that came to my mind was looking into this matter further. As she left, I could feel the heartbeat in my ears, all the way to her office. I felt horrible knowing that I was infringing on her personal space, but I needed the answers. I searched through her desk, trying to find any excuses that would make sense of these images which still felt bizarre to me. At first, there were only design sketches, contracts, and receipts. Everything was quite ordinary, until I came across a locked drawer in her filing cabinet. I paused for a second and then tried to pick it using a paperclip. What I had in front of me was an unremarkable black notebook, seated quite perfectly in the drawer. As I opened the unremarkable black notebook, I felt as if my hands were trembling. The pages of the notebook were packed with symbols, codes, and names. Names which I could distinctly remember from the news channels. This journal contained the names of well-known criminals. While flipping through the pages, my stomach revolted because I saw the names of resounding smugglers, arms dealers, and other notorious organized crime figures. Detailed plans, dates, and maps of operation were bound. It was like a blueprint detailing an intricate criminal plan, and the nucleus of everything was my wife. There is a possibility that you may not see it at all if you do not follow our channel. But if you're subscribed, congratulations! With a click of a button, you may easily access some of the most riveting stories out there and never be left without listening to amazing stories at any time. The moment the truth settled upon me, it sent jolts down my spine which I experienced like nausea. The person who I've spent my life with, my wife, was living a life outside of her marriage, but why? How deep is this? Most importantly, how long has this been going on for? I was and still am an active searcher, which led me to peek deep further into the drawer a little more, and what I found baffled me. A collection of fake ID cards, all with a different name yet each had Lily's face. I trembled at how she had so many identities. This was no side hustle or ordinary means of income, rather, a detailed life of lies that she managed to craft perfectly for many years devoid of my knowledge. I was clear with myself that it would be pointless to talk to her in person as she might have dangerous answers. I was sure I was already way over my head if she was involved in something this serious. Because of this, I opted to contact someone who would help me make sense of what I had gotten myself into. So, I reached out to Mark, an old college buddy of mine. Mark worked in cybersecurity at a government agency, so I figured he could assist me without asking too many questions. I met Mark at a rather peaceful cafe just outside of town. This time, I made sure to carry the notebook and fake IDs along with me. While he remained silent, I did let him in on what I had uncovered, only to be met with a more serious expression every minute that passed by. Mark told me, "This is no laughing matter. These names, these codes, they are rooted into the world of international crime syndicates. These fake IDs, these parts were made properly." He said this after a long pause. "Can you learn more?" I inquired, anxiety seeping into my voice. "I want to know who my wife is," Mark said. "I can pursue it. However, you must be aware of the damage you could do. If she is mixed up with these sorts of people, they will not think twice about how far they will go for you." I retorted, "I have no option. I am certain I need to know the truth." Mark was ready to assist me, but cautioned that I should exercise great care. For the next few days, I've noticed him trying to cover up, looking into the information I provided him. While he did this, I moved on pretending that nothing is wrong, maintaining some normalcy in front of Lily. When she came back from the business trip, she was as warm and loving as always, but also completely blank. I couldn't reconcile the woman I had been in love with the notebook description. It felt like she was two different individuals. One night, Mark called me panicking and felt the need to share something. He said, "You need to hear this," before proceeding to play an audio clip through the phone. It was an audio clip with Lily speaking to a man whose identity I could not make out. They spoke about a shipment, mentioning routes, payments, and what appeared to be security details. My blood ran cold as I listened to her speak in a tone I had never heard before, cold, calculating, and commanding. This was not the woman I knew. This was someone else entirely. "There's even more," Mark said after the recording finished. "She has been operating under the name of Scarlett. She has been on the books for years with several agencies. She is under suspicion for the planning and execution of several high-profile illegal activities. Your wife is one of the most feared criminal genius out there." I could not believe nor comprehend what Mark was saying. Scarlett. Why did it have to be such an ugly name? It made my skin crawl. How was I supposed to live knowing this? And even if I did live with it, well, what would it mean for our life together? "Mark, is it too late to change my mind?" I asked, trying to grasp the situation. "If it is, then I am sorry. I will have to take it to the authorities. But first, I want to know all the options I have. Mark helped me get in touch with an agent who worked for the federal government and who specialized in organized crime. The area where I was supposed to meet her was safe and secure. I delivered to her everything that I had found out. The house was a mess, but she assured me it was fine. It always struck me as odd to meet someone who was so stern all the time, and I couldn't help but tell her that. I guess people see it as a personality trait, said Agent Harris as she gave me her stern glare. This is important, Agent Harris replied, grimacing as she talked. We have tried tracking down Scarlett for years now. If your wife is indeed Scarlett, then you just handed over the key to disabling a large criminal network to us. What's next then? I asked, my voice empty. I'll have to act fast, she responded. First, we will put her under observation to see what she does. Afterward, we'll have enough evidence to get to her. I nodded, both scared relieved at the same time. The truth is finally out, and very soon, the woman who had deceived me for so long would finally have to face the music. But as I walked out of the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling of profound emptiness. Everything, the life I had known and the marriage I had deemed to be real was gone. The following weeks were the worst of my life. I went home each day to a woman who was keeping up with a facade and pretending as if everything was all right, all while I knew that her life could be shattered at any moment. The surveillance team, attempting to confirm Lily's activities as Scarlett, moved quickly. They worked on tracking her communications, movements, and her dealings with her criminal associates. I scrutinized her for any indication that she knew what was happening, but as usual, Lily's expression was impenetrable. If she was aware of the fact that she was being observed, she remained indifferent to it. For a long time, she had been living a double life, and she was good at keeping it under wraps. Everything came to a climax on this last day, one evening. I was at home, seated in the living room when she happened to walk in. Our eyes locked, and for the first time, I noticed a glimmer of something: understanding, realization. You know, she spoke in a low voice. I can already tell that this part is going to be difficult for me after imagining a few scenarios. For Lily, Steve, and Scarlett, a new reality had just started when the illusion and mystery started to unfold right before them. It makes me wonder if everything is even real in the first place. With love, with mystery, and with heartbreak, it all seemed rather deep, wasn't it? One of them is a secret witch, but the question is, what about the other two? I remember Laurette talking to me through a glass window. While I heard trembling sounds, all I can see were bright lights illuminating my bed with a nip of golden sunlight creating halo around the window. After a while, I started to respond to the question coming right out of her mouth. Is everything fine? The worst part for me was to stop daydreaming. Of course, everything is just perfect, said Lily while sewing through her daydreaming. There was no way she was going to notice her voice. She stood quietly, offering her silence to the land around as she felt every tree singing loudly. You kept me grounded all this time, she said in a soft voice. You were the one person in my life who was real, unlike the rest of my life that was built on falsehoods. But at the end, it was all built on the foundation of lie. I was about to respond when I heard a tremendous knock on the door. I could feel my heart racing as I remembered spending all of my life avoiding this very moment. Agent Harris with her team came charging into the living room of the house while aiming their guns at us. Lily Smith, you are under arrest for multiple counts of organized crime, fraud, and conspiracy, Agent Harris said as weapons were being lowered. Lily willingly went with the officers. She simply looked at me with a sad smile and said, I guess this is goodbye. I watched in silence as they handcuffed her and led her away. All that was left was the shadow of her other personality, aka the criminal mastermind Scarlett. The woman I had once loved and shared my life with was no more. I was tasked with reinstating the pieces of my broken life. After her arrest, the media attention was crazy. The world was interested in the tale of Scarlett, who had been an active fugitive for years and who lived a double life as a sore suburbia's housewife. My life as an unsuspecting husband added to the tale, serving as a reminder that we can never truly know our loved ones. I sold the house because I could not force myself to live surrounded with reminders of a relationship that now felt so convoluted. I shifted to a different city in search of a new beginning away from the deception under which Lily's shadow lingered. I spent months in therapy trying to manage the emotions and the sense of loss I felt. It was a long and excruciating process, but eventually, I began to heal. With time, I was able to reconnect with the fact that I was also a survivor, and while I was victimized by Lily's deceit, I was someone who had chosen to live through it. It did remove the agony entirely, but it provided a long overdue sense of closure. What I once delved deep in was stripped away and was replaced with a new reality, one where I had to completely reshape who I was and what I stood for. At this point, the concepts of trust, love, and truth were utterly different from what they were before, all thanks to the ordeal I had to endure. Like every other individual, I too learned that people are not always who they are perceived to be, and even the most intimate of relationships can lie beneath. But the most important of them was that your life can only be reclaimed after facing the devastating truth head-on.